Blood spattered the walls, the darkness of the bedroom, the man's distorted face frozen in madness. He had just learned his girlfriend's secret. Humiliating, dirty, cruel. In an instant, love turned to hate and tenderness to murderous urge. The story begins in a small town in the southern United States. A 32-year-old man named Jonathan Miller worked as an auto mechanic at a local shop. His life was smooth and predictable. Work, occasional get-togethers with friends, and evenings alone. Everything changed when he met Emily Harper, a 25-year-old woman from a neighboring state. She worked at a highway cafe where Jonathan stopped for lunch one day. Their conversation began casually, but within a few days, he realized he wanted to see her more often. Emily seemed mysterious to him. She had a way of smiling as if she were hiding something more than just politeness. He noted her confident manner and how easily she put people at ease. For Jonathan, accustomed to monotony, this woman was a breath of fresh air. He began coming to the cafe more often, sometimes without any particular reason, just to be in her company again. Their relationship developed rapidly. Just a month after they met, Emily moved in with him. Jonathan's friends were surprised. He was never one to make hasty decisions, but this time everything seemed different. He explained it simply. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. The first weeks of their life together were filled with warmth. They spent a lot of time together, evening strolls along deserted streets, dinners at home, and occasional trips out of town. Their intimate life was also untroubled. Emily was uninhibited, which initially flattered him, as his previous relationships had been much more discreet. Her boldness and initiative delighted him, and he felt desired and needed. However, oddities soon began to emerge. Jonathan noticed Emily often disappearing in the evenings, ostensibly to meet up with friends. Sometimes she returned late, avoided unnecessary conversations, and seemed to withdraw into herself. One day, he noticed she was receiving messages late at night and quickly deleting them. Questions irritated her. She responded evasively, claiming they were things from the past. Despite his suspicions, Jonathan continued to trust her. Deep down, he knew he'd become too attached and was afraid of losing her. He tried to quell his anxiety, telling himself that every relationship has its share of misunderstandings. Nevertheless, a feeling of unease was brewing within him. He was even more alarmed by the gossip around town. People who knew Emily hinted at her turbulent past. One acquaintance mentioned that she'd previously lived with a man in another state, and that story had ended in scandal. Jonathan brushed it off, but the aftertaste remained. Changes began to occur in their daily life, too. Emily became increasingly demanding. She lacked money, asking for purchases he couldn't always afford. During intimate moments, she became increasingly uninhibited, and sometimes Jonathan found it excessive. For the first time, he felt he didn't understand the woman he was living with. Despite the warning signs, the man hesitated to discuss everything openly. Two emotions warred within him: the desire to preserve the relationship and the growing feeling that a dangerous secret lurked behind that smile. He didn't yet know that this secret would soon destroy everything. With each passing month, Emily's behavior became increasingly erratic. Outwardly, she remained caring and attentive, but her habits worried Jonathan. He noticed that when she received messages on her phone, her mood would change dramatically. Sometimes she'd lock herself in the bathroom and sit there for a long time, and when she returned, she'd look as if she'd just cried or, conversely, felt relieved. Her sudden absences were especially troubling. She would leave in the evening to meet a friend and return after midnight. She would respond to questions coldly. "Don't be so jealous." But the man sensed there was more behind her words. One evening, when Emily was staying out longer than usual, Jonathan decided to check her bag. He'd never done anything like this before, but anxiety overcame him. Among the cosmetics and odds and ends, he found a bottle of expensive perfume, something he'd never seen in her home. Nearby, an envelope of cash, wrapped in a napkin, contained about $300. When Emily returned, he couldn't resist asking about it. She flushed. "It was a gift from a friend, and the money is my savings." But her voice was trembling. which only heightened his suspicions. His intimate life also ceased to bring him joy. If their intimacy had once been an expression of passion, now it increasingly resembled a game in which he felt out of place. Emily would demand unusual actions that seemed alien to him. When he tried to refuse, she would laugh and say, "You're too boring." These words deeply wounded his pride. One night, Jonathan woke up to find Emily texting on her phone. Her back was to him, but the light from her screen was reflected in the mirror. He caught the phrases, "I miss you," and "It will be better next time." His heart sank. He sat up abruptly in bed and demanded an explanation. Emily slammed the phone shut and snapped, "You're being such a child." They had their first serious argument, and that night they slept separately. A few days later, he overheard conversations in the workshop. One of the clients, who knew Emily from her previous city, mentioned that she'd been seen at a bar with some men. Jonathan pretended not to notice, but inside he was seething. His suspicions grew when he accidentally found a nightclub business card in her pocket. Written on the back in a man's handwriting was the words, "You were incredible." He clutched the paper in his fist and hid it without saying a word. The thought that he was being deceived kept flickering through his mind. Despite this, he tried to maintain the illusion of normalcy. He invited her to dinner, suggested going out of town, tried to recreate the old atmosphere. But Emily became increasingly distant. During moments of intimacy, she would suddenly withdraw, as if her thoughts were far away. He began to feel like a stranger in his own home. One evening, as they sat in the kitchen, Jonathan asked cautiously, "Are you sure you want to be with me?" She looked at him longingly and quietly said, "I just want to live freely." The words struck her like a blow. There was no hint of love in them, no desire to save the relationship. After this conversation, he began to lose control. Thoughts of her infidelities, of her secret life, haunted him. The question kept ringing in his head, what is she hiding? Jonathan knew he had to find out the truth, even if it destroyed him completely. Jonathan's suspicions became an obsession. He could no longer sleep peacefully and hung on Emily's every gesture, her every word. It seemed to him that she lived in two worlds, one in front of him, domestic and calm, the other, hidden, filled with secrets and strange men. The decisive moment came when he once again found an envelope with money and a hotel business card in her bag. He didn't start a scene right away, but deep down he sensed the truth was near. That evening, after Emily had fallen asleep, he took her phone and, overcoming his fear, opened the messages. There were no direct confessions, but several messages were clear enough. "Thanks for the night. You're the best," and photos taken in the room. In the pictures, she was in lingerie, and next to her was the silhouette of a man whose face was not captured. This revelation came as a shock to Jonathan. He no longer doubted it. Emily was leading a double life. He felt the ground shift beneath his feet. What had seemed like love turned out to be a lie. At first, he felt devastated, but soon he was overwhelmed by rage. Images of their intimate moments flashed through his mind, but they now seemed alien, dirty. Every kiss, every movement, it all felt like a lie. Over the next few days, he tried to talk to her, but every conversation ended in arguments. Emily avoided direct answers, accusing him of mistrust and jealousy. Sometimes she acted as if the situation amused her. This drove him crazy. What was especially painful was that the intimacy didn't stop. She could still initiate sex, but now it felt like mockery. He saw something cold in her gaze, as if she were comparing him to someone else. One day, when she again suggested something he considered humiliating, he snapped, "Where did you learn that?" Emily merely smirked and replied, "You're not the first man in my life." These words completely destroyed him. A feeling arose inside him that he had no control over anything. He began following her, checking where she went, who she met. One time, he followed her and saw her enter a bar on the outskirts of town. An hour later, she emerged, accompanied by a strange man, and got into his car. Jonathan sat nearby, gripping the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He couldn't sleep a wink that night. Images swirled in his head. Emily with another man, her smile, her laughter. He felt his own life turning into a mocking farce. The next day, he tried to speak calmly, but inside he was seething. "I know you're cheating on me," he said. Emily didn't offer any excuses. She simply replied, "You ruined everything with your jealousy." Her indifference was the last straw. From that moment on, Jonathan began preparing for the decisive conversation. He felt he had to force her to confess, to hear the truth from her lips. A mixture of humiliation, rage, and despair grew within him. Every step she took, every glance became proof of betrayal. That evening, when they were back in bed, he couldn't contain himself. The words just came out. "You're sleeping with other people, and I know it." She looked him coldly in the eyes and said, "And what are you going to do about it?" Her voice was challenging, as if she were deliberately provoking him. After that phrase, everything changed for Jonathan. He realized he couldn't stay in this relationship any longer. The thought was brewing in his head that the only way out was to stop her forever. The evening that turned fateful began with a routine argument. Jonathan returned from work earlier than usual and found Emily in the kitchen with a glass of wine. She was wearing a short robe, her hair loose, and looked relaxed, as if his return hadn't interested her at all. He immediately noticed a lighter on the table that belonged to someone else and a nearly empty bottle of expensive whiskey, which hadn't been in the house before. "Who came?" Jonathan's voice sounded hoarse. Emily chuckled and, without looking up, replied, "What difference does it make to you?" This phrase marked the beginning of a long and painful conversation. Jonathan tried to coax a confession out of her, demanding the truth, but she evaded the question again and again. At some point, her behavior became downright provocative. She moved closer, put her arms around his neck, and whispered, "If you must know, then yes, I dated others. And they were better than you." The words were like a knife to the heart. Something inside Jonathan snapped. His anger, pent up for weeks, burst forth. He pushed her away, but Emily only laughed and added, "You've always been a weakling, even in bed." What happened next was swift. He grabbed her by the shoulders, trying to silence her. She struggled, clawed at his arms, and screamed that she would leave him for someone real man. Chaos reigned in the room. Glasses fell. A plate shattered with a crash. At one point, she tried to humiliate him again. Coming close, Emily whispered, "You've never satisfied me." Those words were the last straw. Jonathan pushed her against the wall, grabbed a kitchen knife left over from dinner, and in rage struck her first. Emily's scream pierced the silence of the house. She tried to fight him off, but he was stronger. The blows came one after another, mechanical, mindless. The blade ripped through his skin, splashing blood onto his face, hands, and clothes. With each passing second, he became less and less aware of what he was doing, but he couldn't stop. A few minutes later, everything was quiet. Emily's body lay limp on the floor, a scarlet puddle spreading nearby. Her eyes were open, but empty and motionless. Jonathan stood over her, breathing heavily, and only now began to comprehend what had happened. The room was a scene of horror. Signs of struggle, overturned chairs, blood spattered on the walls. The sharp smell of metal assaulted his nose. His hands trembled, and the knife fell to the floor with a dull thud. A roar filled his chest, and his thoughts were jumbled. For several minutes, he simply stood there, trying to figure out what to do next. At first, the thought of calling the police flashed through his mind, but then fear took over. He imagined being arrested, everyone finding out what had happened. The panic grew. He rushed to the bathroom to wash the blood off himself, but the more water ran down his body, the more desperate he became. Emily's body remained on the floor, and he couldn't escape that fact. Returning to the kitchen, he covered her with a blanket, as if hoping to hide what he had done, at least from himself. The hours dragged on painfully slowly. Every movement in the house echoed. He sat in silence, knowing it was all over. Inside, there was no relief, no remorse, only emptiness. After the murder, Jonathan sat on the kitchen chair for a long time, staring at the blanket-covered body. Time lost all meaning. The clock on the wall showed 3 a.m, but that no longer mattered to him. He was in a daze, not fully believing what he had done. His first instinct was to hide the body. He pulled large garbage bags and old sheets from the closet. With difficulty, breathing heavily, he wrapped Emily in them, trying not to look at her face. Every touch on her motionless body reinforced his awareness of reality. He tried to carry the bundle into the garage and hid it in the trunk of his old car. He then began cleaning up the mess. Using rags and detergents, he carefully scrubbed the blood from the floor and walls. However, splatters remained on the carpet and furniture. He knew it was impossible to completely remove the stains, but he continued washing and scrubbing in a panic. His hands shook, and he stopped to breathe more and more often. The same question kept ringing in his head. What now? Towards morning, he drove to the outskirts of town, to an area rarely traveled by cars. He stopped at an old, abandoned quarry. Opening the trunk, he struggled to remove the package and rolled it down the rocky slope. In the darkness, he couldn't see where it landed, but Jonathan heard the dull thud as it hit the ground. His heart was pounding so hard it seemed he could hear it from a distance. He got back in the car and drove away, trying not to look back. For several days, he tried to live as normal. He went to work, talked to colleagues, but inside, fear was eating away at him. Every glance from the outside seemed suspicious. Every mention of the news made him shudder. When one day the radio reported the disappearance of a young woman named Emily Harper, he knew an investigation had begun. The police quickly became interested in her disappearance. Jonathan was called in for questioning as the last person to see her alive. He tried to remain calm, describing an argument after which she allegedly left the house. But the officers noted his hesitant answers. They noted evidence of recent cleaning in the house, and a neighbor mentioned screaming and noise that night. A few days later, Emily's body was found in the quarry. Workers who came to inspect the area noticed a bundle among the rocks. An autopsy revealed multiple stab wounds. Police soon established a connection with Jonathan. Traces of blood were found on his clothes, which he had attempted to wash. Forensic experts confirmed a DNA match. The arrest took place in the morning. Jonathan was in the garage when police cars pulled up to the house. He didn't resist, only quietly repeating, "She humiliated me." During questioning at the station, he recounted what had happened. His words were matter-of-fact, emotionless. He admitted that he had lost his composure and committed the murder in a state of passion. The investigation lasted several months. The lawyer tried to build a defense, citing Emily's psychological pressure and her double life. However, the court considered the facts: multiple knife wounds, an attempt to hide the body, and the destruction of evidence. All of this indicated deliberate actions. In the courtroom, Jonathan looked broken. He rarely looked up, spoke softly, and sometimes remained silent altogether. Emily's relatives were present at the trial, and their presence made the atmosphere even more tense. The prosecutor demanded a harsh sentence, citing the brutality of the crime. The sentence was handed down that summer: life imprisonment without parole. The judge noted the extreme cruelty of the crime and the attempt to cover up the evidence. For Jonathan, it was the end. He simply bowed his head and remained silent. The case generated considerable attention in the local media. Newspapers reported on the tragedy in the quiet town, and television provided detailed coverage. Many discussed not only the murder itself, but also the background, a relationship rife with lies and humiliation. Jonathan's imprisonment marked the end of a story that began as an ordinary romance. A man seeking love met a woman with secrets, and their union ended in blood and death. Jonathan Miller's case ended with a life sentence. The court found him guilty of murdering Emily Harper and attempting to cover up the crime. The case file contains photographs of the mutilated body, interrogation transcripts, and witness statements, a dry, literal record of the tragedy of a life irrevocably shattered.